Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraft woman Aisha Tolson. We would like to acknowledge the delegation representing the Indian Air Force who are joining us this evening. We warmly welcome the members of the Northwest Sub-Branch of the Vietnam Veterans Association of Australia from Glenroy, Melbourne, and we also warmly welcome the members of the Patriots of Australia Military Motorcycle Club in attendance this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and by Army cadets representing the 25th Battalion, New South Wales. If you are able, would you please stand and join in singing the National Anthem? Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national museum and memorial came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private James Brown. James Brown was born about 1891 in the Melbourne suburb of Richmond, one of 3 sons born to James and Margaret Brown. The Brown family were originally from Scotland and were active in the local Caledonian society. After finishing his schooling at Central State School in Richmond, young James Brown began an apprenticeship as a printer. By the time the Great War began, he was working as a compositor, having been with the company for 7 years. In July 1915, James and his younger brother Colin enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces. The following month, the 29th Battalion was raised at Broadmeadows Camp, comprised of volunteers, such as the Brown brothers, raised during the recruitment drive that followed the landing at Gallipoli. After some initial training with his new battalion in Australia, Private Brown embarked at Melbourne on the 14th of November 1915 aboard the troop ship Kabinga, bound for the Middle East. After training in the Mina desert camps on the outskirts of Cairo, in June 1916, the Brown brothers proceeded to France, destined for the Western Front. The 29th Battalion fought its first major battle at Fromelles in northern France on the 19th of July. Directed against a strong German position, the attack was intended primarily as a feint to draw German troops away from another offensive to the south. A 7-hour preparatory bombardment deprived the attack of any surprise and was ineffective in subduing the well-entrenched defenders. When the troops finally attacked, they suffered heavily at the hands of the German machine guns. The attack was a complete failure. The Germans quickly realised that it was merely a feint, and the 5th Division suffered over 5,000 casualties. The battle was summed up by one soldier. The novelty of being a soldier wore off in about 5 seconds. It was like a bloody butcher's shop. After reorganising and bringing in the wounded, the 29th Battalion held the front line until the end of the month, when it was relieved. After taking up billets in a nearby French town, the battalion continued to rotate in and out of the front line. In late October, it took up positions on the front line near Fleur, relieving English troops in the sector. Constant rain had left some trenches knee-deep in mud, which it took the troops about 5 hours to trudge through to reach the front line. The English troops were glad to be relieved. They had seen heavy fighting, and the corpses of the dead lay thickly scattered over the whole area. That first night, rations did not arrive, and the only water available was from the shell holes filled with the heavy rain. Enemy artillery fire continued almost without stop, and after suffering numerous casualties, the bulk of the frontline garrison were intermittently moved back away from the worst of the carnage, but casualties continued to mount. On the 3rd of November, James Brown and his brother Colin were killed in action. While there are no records detailing the circumstances of their deaths, it is likely that they were together when they were struck by shell fire. Given a hasty burial in the trenches near Fleur, their gravesites were lost during the subsequent fighting. Today, they are commemorated at the Australian National War Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, which lists over 10,000 Australian soldiers with no known graves. James Brown was 25 years old. His brother Colin was 20. Back in Australia, Margaret Brown never got over the shock of losing her 2 sons. While the youngest son, Thomas, was discharged at the end of the war and returned to Australia, the strain was too much for her. Her health broke down and she died on the 27th of September, 1918. James Brown's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of the listing of both of the brothers' names on the Australian National War Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private James Brown, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.